Film Festival. Just to remind many of you who may be friends already, this is the theater that the Saturday before the film festival shows 4 screenings, only for friends, for free, not seen again at the film festival. They're really good movies. Consider being a friend. It works both ways. That's great, thank you. Please turn off all your electronic devices. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael.
Thank you to the third of you who applauded. It's too much alcohol, right? Thank you for coming. I want to introduce to you the filmmakers of tonight's film. I love this film, and I saw it a couple of months ago, and for those of you who are baby boomers who have raised the next generation of kids, or maybe they're your grandkids now, who are attached to the digital world, this film really captured the moment we're in, and I haven't seen that many films that have done that yet, probably because we're still in the beginning of the moment, but this film just does a wonderful job with it, and I want to bring out the filmmakers right now. Also, I want to tell you that she did mention it. There's an added screening tonight at 11 p.m. at the Bijou of one of the best films in the festival called The Last Reel. It's by, have you seen it? The Truth? Yes. It's the first film made by a woman from Cambodia in 44 years. And it's so powerful and so good. And so please come to it if you're free tonight at 11 o'clock. So without further ado, I'm going to first bring up the first one. I'll just start with from Ann Arbor, Pioneer High School. The writer and producer of the film, Sharon. Thank you. And then coming here from Ann Arbor Community High School, the People's Republic, the director and writer of the film, Logan Kibens. From Birmingham, Michigan, via Torch Lake, Lahti.
As better is a flaming hoop that we all walk through to the Top Jam soundtrack.
The two of you grew up in Ann Arbor, but didn't know each other there. Met in Chicago, where one of you was going to the Art Institute, the other was going to Northwestern, and then things happened, and you've made this beautiful film. It's really an incredible movie. Maybe you'd like to just say a few words about it. Then afterwards, stick around, and Christine and Logan and Sharon will come up here for a Q&A, and you won't want to miss this. So please stick around for that. So feel free to say a few words.
Sharon and I have been together for 16 years, and we wanted to make a movie about what it really takes to be in a long-term relationship and how much you can grow and change and the struggles that it takes to stay together. Because so many movies start at the beginning of a relationship and end after marriage because everything's perfect after that. Maybe we should tell the story of being in a long-term committed relationship as two artists. So, and thank you so much, Michael, for having us here and introducing the film like that. To know that the film speaks to you is so important and why we did it. So I hope that you guys get something from the film as well and enjoy.
Hi, I read the script, and I'm playing a very small part, so if you blink, you'll miss me, just FYI. But I read the script and was so taken by the message, Michael, as you're saying, that so captures that fear of intimacy and how technology is seeming to replace it, but it's not. But it's a great kind of, but before you actually can commit to someone, it's a nice sort of, go-to place. And then working with Logan, who is a first-time feature filmmaker, director, was one of the best experiences I've had. I worked 3 days, and it was incredible because of this woman. And I really blown away.
just one thing. I had the incredible pleasure of teaching a masterclass in screenwriting this morning at Interlochen, where I see the most amazing, talented young students. And one of the things I showed them some of the film, and I told them that if you can start by telling a secret from your life, something true that you've never seen on screen before, that makes a real good start to where to make a major piece of work. And what I'd like to say in this moment, I'll talk and answer all your questions after the film, but we began with trying to share something true from our real lives, and we're just so proud to be able to share it with you.
That's great, and I just want to also point out, Logan learned violin at Interlochen. And Sharon was in musical theater at Interlochen. So they have a German City connection. They're excited to be here. I'm happy you're here. Enjoy the movie, and they'll be back afterwards for the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Was a reporter for National Public Radio, NPR, for about 5 years. But much more important than that, I am a native Traversinian. That's right. And I'm very excited to be back here at the Film Fest. So let's please welcome the two directors, or the director and writer of the show, and give them a big round of applause, as well as one of the actresses, Christine. Come on, guys. Sharon, Logan, and Christine. So I thought I would actually start by saying, Siri, what should I ask the panelists? She said some things you can ask me, and then there's a whole bunch of things that didn't work at all. All right, that's what I was thinking about it. So I was hoping, first of all, we mentioned briefly before the show that you guys have some Michigan connections. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I did go to Ann Arbor Pioneer High School. Go Pioneers. And in the summers, I came up to Interlochen to study theater and then musical theater. And in fact, I was saying this morning, I was in intermediate cabin 13 with a playwright named Sarah Rule, who, for what, when I was the artistic director of a theater company in Chicago and she was winning a Pulitzer Prize, Interlochen was having a good year for theater. I'm really connected to, and then since then, in 2013 and 2014, I came back in the summer to teach in their new film program. I was the screenwriting teacher, so I've spent a lot of happy and artistically growing summers here.
Wonderful.
I'm also from Ann Arbor, although Sharon and I met in Chicago. And after this festival, we're headed to Drummond Island, where my parents have a cabin, and I've had it since I was like less than 1 year old, so it's my favorite place in the world is up there. So.
Very cool. And Christine?
Yeah, I spend every summer on Torch Lake, which is close to here, and spend a lot of time in Traverse City. I was actually in one of the Cherry Festival floats with my sister. We were on the float waving like that.
You still got it. And we were just chatting briefly before we came up on stage, and you guys said that you watched some of the film, but not all of the film, because there are some parts that you watch and some that you don't. And so I told you I have to ask you that on stage. So what's up with that?
Well, I also edited the film. I started in post-production, and so I've probably seen it 500 million zillion times. It's really fun to watch with audiences, and so we've been on the festival circuit for maybe 4 months now, and we've watched a number of screenings, and it's really interesting to see how people respond differently. So I'm glad you guys have a dark sense of humor and all laugh during the masturbation. Thank you. That was what we were going for. There's particular scenes, and I want to watch Christine's sequence because she was in the audience and she hasn't seen it before, so we watched that as well.
You hadn't seen the film yet? This was your first time?
Yeah.
And?
Thumbs up. I loved it. It's so amazing to read a film, to shoot a film, and then to see what happens, the magic in the editing room. I had no idea vocabulary that these guys were cooking up, which so added to the inner workings of his mind, was sort of a subjective point of view of this main character. I found that so moving and fascinating, and I'm really proud to be part of this film.
I'll just say, I always love to watch the play Ask Emily, where she talks to herself on the phone. So I was in that theater company in Chicago. We shot it in our real theater with all the other members of the company who aren't famous people, are real members of the company. And so writing that play was very important to me as someone who has spent years using my own real life in my work and thinking about the implications of doing that. I never tire of watching May talk to herself digitally. I think it's, I still don't feel I totally understand everything that scene might have to give me by watching it, because I do think it's very much at the heart of the themes of the film about self-revelation and technology and the confusion as to what is ourselves.
You guys probably hate this question, but I wonder, like, what is, to you, the film really about? Is it about technology? Is it about something else? I told you were going to hate it.
I mean, it's about a lot of things that, okay, so generally when I think about a film, I'm focused on one idea that I'm fascinated with, and then another idea that I'm fascinated with, and they seem disconnected. They seem like they're not in line with each other, and then when a third idea comes into play, and that is like the fulcrum between those first two, that's when I'm like, oh, okay, that's enough to make a film about. I feel like, so I've studied, I went to CalArts on a sound scholarship. As I said, I worked in post-production, so I started as a visual artist, so I feel like all of the components of film can do so much individually, and when you have 90 minutes to use sound and how that can affect people, and image, and performance, and language, and time, I just want to pack as much in as possible. So that's the broad answer. Simply speaking, to just pick one out, I just got really fascinated in terms of technology with how I think it makes us also anxious. I feel like a predominant aspect of the current generation is anxiety, and most people I talk to suffer from anxiety, and I suffered from panic attacks, especially during grad school. I still suffer from anxiety, just not panic attacks so much, but and I feel like you're going to something thinking it can mirror you and give you something back because you're afraid to maybe go to a person and be vulnerable with them. So you have this technology available to you to try to connect with that, and it may give you superfluous things for a little bit, but since it can't actually feed back to you and say, I am also vulnerable and and imperfect like you, and that's okay, then I think it just creates this feedback loop of anxiety. So that's something that I wanted to try to capture in the film.
False sense of comfort, sort of. Yeah. And Christine, I'm curious to know what it was about the film that attracted you to it and made you want to be part of it. When you were reading the script, was there something that really resonated with you and made you say, yes, this is something that I want to do?
I think the story of May's character really moved me. The difficulty, the challenge of finding a partner who wants truly for you to flourish and grow and not in any way hold you back. And I think it's so common in marriages and relationships where, in spite of yourself, and not even consciously, because of one's own hole or need, they need to keep the other one down. And it can be, it can happen with one and then the other, and you can trade off. But the idea that this couple could break through that pattern was beautiful to me and really moving, that it was a woman's, basically to me, a woman's story, even though he maybe has the biggest journey, but in a way she does. I don't know. To me, it's a relationship movie that is unusual, and it's seen through the lens of something that's so modern and current, which is technology. But it's such an old theme about relationships. And it really moved me, and the writing is so smart and funny, and my character was moving to me. I thought she was tough and funny, and I just liked her, and again, it was three of the greatest days of my life shooting, and it was because of these two women. This woman who had never directed before, and she's like a techie, you know, she's the sound and the editing and the post-production, and she had a way in the set that was unbelievably open, confident, not threatened. I mean, I come in on the set with 40 years of experience, and she just listened, and, you know, I've been on sets with other directors, mostly guys, who are immediately like, feel the need to know everything, as opposed to, you know, Logan just said, I don't know, let's see, maybe, yeah, okay, let's try that, yeah, okay. And the openness and that kind of ability to collaborate is so important, and I was really taken with both of these ladies' gifts in that regard.
I'm sure there's many of you in the audience that have some questions, so we've got a couple of microphones coming around. If you've got a question, just throw your hand up. Got one right here.
Oh, yeah. Before I did mood once today. Christine Lahti was marvelous. I saw a lot of my mother, in fact, in that character. This is going to be difficult. Do women, female film directors, writers, are they, you may not even see it the same way, are you conscious of the depiction of male characters? And I guess what I'm specifically saying, and I agree with you, in that the male character was perhaps shown in a negative light. In other words, are you aware of that impact that you might have on, in this case, a male viewer? For instance, a typical example is the man would be controlling how he controlled the phone, and you know, at the end he says he's an asshole, and he admits to that, and then being needy and so forth. And from my own personal experience, I find that common in certain films that are made by women. And I'm just curious as whether or not that's something that you consider at all when you're making a film.
Maybe another way to put that would be: Are you aware of stereotypes when you in your writing, or how do you cope with stereotypes and not wanting to reinforce, or how to subvert stereotypes? How does that play into the way that you write your characters?
Yes, I mean, I think that when you ask any filmmaker who's put a substantial amount of time into their work, if they thought of X, they've always thought about X. Because that's all we do for years, is think about what we're putting up there and combing over every moment. And I'm going to answer in an indirect way, which is I've been asked by mostly friends, like, why, you know, you guys are two married women, why isn't it two women? And first, I'll say just creatively, I made a short film that had a female couple in it right before this film, and so I wasn't as interested in exploring that dynamic. And I wanted to explore a character who had a harder time going towards vulnerability. And I will say, you know, I am a genderqueer lesbian who thinks about gender a lot. And it's something that I think allowed me to explore. I felt like if I put a representation that, you know, isn't directly myself, but has aspects of me up there, and that was a woman, that people would think immediately, this is somebody who's capable of empathy and vulnerability. And so I wanted to see, well, let's put somebody up there who you're not going to immediately feel that way about, and bring him to a place where he's able to participate in those very natural human emotions.
I want to agree with everything Christine said about this film, and just to say congratulations. This is, I certainly haven't seen every film at this festival, but this is the most creative and most profound film that I have seen here. And I don't know that I do have a question. I just, how did you, well, I understand that part of what there's something very theatrical inside this. And, I also wanted to say that I think May is inspirational. Wow.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
What a performance. But there's something very theatrical inside of this film. And I understand that you, the writer, and I don't remember your name, has a very theatrical background, and certainly that, and so there's a great deal of theater here, but there's an incredible amount of understanding of what cinema is and the differences between theater and cinema. And that's one of the things that I'd love to hear you talk about a little bit, because I think it's key to what is so creative about this as a piece of cinema.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'll talk a little bit, but then I want Sharon to talk since she was in the theater company. But so Sharon was in the Neo-Futurists in Chicago for 7 years or something, and that was early in our relationship. And I worked doing video and projection design for theater for a while, so like film pieces that would be in plays. And I would, unsurprisingly get roped into doing a lot of stuff for her theater company, because that's how it works. That's where the play, all my shit gets turned into props came from, because one time she took our cat and put him in the play, and I would just be missing like objects from our house and they'd be in plays. But that meant that I spent a lot of time filming for theater company and thinking about how do you translate something that's so, has such a energy to it and is so about being present in the moment and has that live feeling. What's the best way to film that? I also worked with a lot of dance companies and filmed dance, and like I found the best way to film those things is to just leave it alone and try to just sit the camera there and let that energy play out in front of you. But we did also, I think a lot about how that would affect our main character and the sort of chaos of that. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so the Neo-Futurists, which you get a glimpse of in the film, are very much about liveness. We talk to our audience, we go and we touch our audience, and that's about exploiting the natural strengths of the medium. What is awesome about the medium of liveness is that I can interact directly with you and say, hey, great Fender shirt here in the 4th row, and thank you so much for starting your question with a compliment. It still means a great deal to us. And these are real things that I'm feeling in real time, and you know it's real because you watched me, right? And something that was really cool as we moved both individually and together as a couple from live theater to film was that Logan had a lot to teach me about what the strengths of cinema are, and how she had learned over the years to go toward the strengths of her intrinsic medium. So, for instance, watching Christine's beautiful performance, part of why you see that is because the camera allows you to be so close to her, and she could give such a naturalistic, vulnerable, heartbreaking performance because she didn't have to give it to the back of the balcony. She could give it right there on that couch with May and Martin next to her again and again from this very vulnerable place. And the camera could be close enough to capture every moment, every drip of that makeup. And that's a real strength. And similarly, a strength of the camera is those big, beautiful wide shots that Logan would take on the pier, or the traveling shots as he's running, or the sort of push-in shots in the hotel on May as she's sort of trapped behind that hotel counter. So I'd say something we think a lot about when we think about theatricality versus cinema is what are the strengths of this medium and how do we use those strengths to best capture our story.
I was really interested in that wide shot at the water and why you chose to be wide and stay wide at maybe the most important moment of this man's journey in this movie.
That's a shot that, I edited the movie, so I didn't have to fight too hard for it, but I had to fight a little bit for it, and people were like, you can trim some time, but it feels, I kept being like, that's the sword I'll die on, like that shot is the movie for me, and I try to lead you into it by having long shots and then a slightly longer shot, and then So that happens in the sex scene, it happens when May lays down on him in his first panic scene, and then you have that pier shot. And I come from like an experimental film background, and I went to school at Cal Arts, where there's an embracing of, James Benning is one of the filmmakers who teaches there, and he makes movies where each shot is 15 minutes long. I didn't want to do that to you guys, but I wanted, for me, it's about Joe finally being present and opening up his sort of peripheral perspective and not having blinders on, and not, he eliminates so much information by just like looking at the granular level and thinking that everything is the same. And so I wanted him to finally open up, and I just was hoping that the audience could like experience that with him through that.
I just wanted to say, I don't mean to be the moderator or something, but I just want to say how powerful that was, because I think the conventional thing would be to go in on the space close and just see an amazing emotional kind of transition. And I loved that you had the discipline and the respect for your story to stay wide and allow the audience to just fill in whatever they wanted to for this guy. It was really powerful and I think unusual. And I just want to address this gentleman's question, which I thought was so honest and difficult for you to ask. I think it's a testament to the movie that you identified, and I don't think that there's anything derogatory about this male character. I personally think he's one of the most human male characters I've seen in recent film. I think he is so complex and human, and I loved him, and I mean, who isn't afraid at some point of being vulnerable? And this guy was, to me, a really sympathetic character. So I think it's great that you had a connection to him, and I don't think that, for me personally, there's anything negative about this male character.
You're here.
Congratulations to everybody. It was a fantastic production.
Where are you? Oh, okay.
Stand up, it'll be obvious. One of the things I observed through the whole thing was the arc of the characters and how they let their lives at work and at home cross over. And it seemed to affect all three of the major characters. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on that and how that plays out against historically what we would think would be we start work at 9 and we start work at 5? In real life, sometimes I get questions from my students at midnight and I answer at 12:32.
Yeah, I mean, it came from a time when Sharon and I were both in grad school together, and we were going to separate programs, but I would be at my school all day, she would be at her school all day, and then I did this program with HBO called the HBO DGA Directing Fellowship, where you shadow directors for a year, and the first show I was on was True Blood, and all of that is shot from like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. because it's about vampires. And so I would be away at night, and she would be away during the day, and you try to connect with each other, but when you have 45 minutes, one person getting out of bed and the other person getting into bed, because you have opposite schedules, it's hard to maintain that. So I think we just wanted to show something where, like, what happens when you give too much of yourself away from your partner and also yourself, and then how hard it is to learn who you are at that point.
And then I would also just add what's interesting. We've never made a major piece of work together. We've both been artists for more than a decade. And we have occasionally worked for each other, like hired the other person to make a component of our project. But this is the first time we've ever collaborated. And I think something we found really interesting was that our art accidentally began to mirror our life. No, our life accidentally actually began to mirror our art, in the sense that we had to learn how to collaborate together as equals by making the film, in the process of making the film. And that was hard and also really rewarding, and now we know how to do it, so we may do it again. But it is this incredible power negotiation and love negotiation and point of view negotiation. I would say at home, Logan and I are not sticklers about anything. Usually we're not toothpaste tube carers. We both do our dishes. We don't have a lot of squabbling, but it turns out we both care more about our work than anything else in the world except each other. And so we would fight, and we would have to argue until one of us convinced the other. And no one, and that I think was good for our marriage, ironically, because we found the area that neither of us were willing to just let it go to please the other, and that turns out to be our work. And I think that, obviously, I think it benefited the work.
Did that relationship at home affect the way that you made the film in any way?
Well, I'm sure it did, and maybe we're not done understanding how, but I will say on set, as I became an on-set producer, as opposed to just the writer on set, but she became the sole director, and it's very important on set to have hierarchy, but we became an unstoppable force by being completely loyal to each other. So I think something that directors, you'll hear in other commentaries and other places will say, and then my producer betrayed me, and she sold me up the river and said we had to cut X amount of money, and that meant they couldn't do Y, and I'm really disappointed and I'll always be bitter about it. And one thing you said, to have a producer-director team where we would disagree privately, but once we came to set, whatever decision had been reached, you could not come between us about it. And that made us very powerful in a number of ways. Hollywood is a place where it's very hard to trust people, and it can be difficult. Large amounts of money make all people insane, and large amounts of money are at risk when you're making movies. Someone has given you a great deal of money, and a huge number of very talented collaborators have been brought together for a very short period of time to spend that money really fast, and hopefully you leave with the footage you need. And that kind of pressure makes people behave poorly sometimes. And by keeping our disagreements quiet until we resolve them, and then bringing ourselves to set as a completely united front that always had someone to back them up, we really could move the needle and get the things we wanted to see on screen.
What other questions do we have? We've got one there in the back.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the empathetic language that you put in May's mouth. It sounds like something I went away for a weekend retreat to learn how to do. And I wondered if it comes like naturally to one of the two of you and that's how it came about, or if it's something you've learned, or it just happened some other way.
Probably, I think it comes naturally to both of us. I think I identify with both characters. I'm not sure about you, Sharon, but it's funny because like we would start saying those things, and then we're like, wait, we removed a whole swath of language from our own conversation because we can't say the lines of our movie anymore. So those are not comforting to us anymore. But it's like, I'm with you. I will say, you know, Sharon is a writer, and recently I made her take an online vocabulary quiz, and she got like in the top 0.01%, and the internet called her Shakespeare, and so she has a way with words. And also, a lot of it was informed from both of my parents studied language, so my dad worked in artificial intelligence, and specifically in language understanding. And my mom was a philosophy teacher and did her dissertation on language. So I think it's just the stuff we think about a lot. But I'm glad that it felt real and also slightly off to you.
I think we've just got time for one more question, and it looks like it's right over there.
Hi, I loved it. Congratulations. I found it particularly moving when Joe speaks to Emily in her language. When he creates a play, I think that's super moving and beautiful. But so congrats, I so enjoyed it. My question was, I'm curious about your collaboration with your composer and whoever did the digital images, because it all went together so seamlessly. It almost felt like they were with you throughout the process rather than people you brought on afterwards to figure out. So just wanted to hear about that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love our composer. So his name is Saif Lewis. He went to CalArts with me. And he came on pretty early. Was it before production that we started talking about it? Yeah, and actually I remember sending him the script, like even before we had financing, just because he and I are friends. And he read it and had thoughts immediately. And he had written, I think what's the end piece over the credits was something he wrote for his wife and daughter. And it was a duet between an analog piano and a digital keyboard. And so then he got the themes, and we spent a lot of time working with him, and he was super dedicated. And also really cool when he would bring us something that we didn't really love, that he would just go and try something different. So, and then the graphics are super interesting. So it's a company called MK12. If you guys know a film called Stranger Than Fiction, with Will Ferrell and Emma Thompson, they did the graphics in that film too, which I've always thought were some of the coolest graphics. But we made like 2 or 3 different versions before we got to them. So we have a whole other set of graphics, and we have stuff that we shot that got replaced. And that was a really interesting process, and I think kind of what translates from my work in projection design and theater. I wanted to find someone who wanted to take what we'd written and interpret it to be better than what we'd written, because it's as you're saying, like showing his interior life. And so they just really got it, and they're a collaborative team of I think 8 designers, and they responded to the film, and so thankfully gave us a massive discount. Otherwise, there's no way we could have afforded them. And so that was actually kind of a truncated process, maybe 6 or 8 weeks. But by that point, we communicated it so much to other designers that I think we knew how to talk about it, and they just responded to it well. So.
And just lastly, real quickly, can you just tell them about opportunities to see the film in the future, if they want to recommend it to other folks?
Sure, so we got distribution through a company called The Orchard, so we're going to be distributed in November of this year, and you guys should
Great. Well, once again, it was really wonderful to have you join us. The Michigan roots especially, it's so nice to have you here. Let's give them one more big round of applause. Don't forget to vote on the film. Drop your vote in the box on the way out. Thanks very much, everyone.
Your rent came late, maybe.